wherever you are joining us from. My name is Afe Adogame, and I'm delighted on behalf of the Nagel Institute to welcome you to this webinar. And first, I would like to convey appreciation to Nelly and Inebudo for ensuring that this space is possible for us to have this conversation. Secondly, let me use this opportunity to welcome Dr. Damaris Pasitao for the first time joining us in her capacity as the new Nagel director. So if you agree with me, you can welcome her with yeah. Well, she's been part of us, but I guess that this is the first time she's joining the webinar in her capacity as the Nagel director. We do also have quite a number of people who regularly perhaps have not been part of the webinar, but who are our either facilitators or advisors. And I think I can cite Jim Spickard on the call. Jim, you're welcome. I can also, I think Musa is, I saw her earlier on the call, so welcome to this webinar. Tayo Additional, another facilitator, is with us. Thank you for joining us. And let me say two things. This webinar today is very special because one, this is the anniversary of our webinar series. This is the 5th in the series, and I think we are very thankful to all of you for being part of this conversation in the past several months, and we hope that we can continue to sustain this. But also, let me use this opportunity to say that this is also the 14th year anniversary of Nelly working with Nagel. So Nelly, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I would also like to recognize Diane. Diane is joining us today. Welcome, and we look forward to this conversation. Finally, I would like to, we also have Professor Mary Getui joining us as well. I will keep recognizing particularly facilitators who are joining us, but to welcome all grantees and their team members who are joining us this morning or afternoon. It's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Kwabena Asamoah-Gyadu, who is not actually a visitor, is a known face. Everybody, I think if you don't know him, then there's something wrong. So what I'm going to do today is not to spend time on a long intro, but just very brief, so that we can give time for Q&A. The pattern of this webinar would be having a kind of conversation with Professor Asamoah-Gyadu, and this might go for perhaps 25 to 30 minutes as the spirit leads, and then we'll segue into the second part, which will be your chance to have a conversation or ask questions and maybe join in the conversation. Professor Asamoah-Gyadu is currently the president of Trinity Theological Seminary in Legon, Accra, Ghana. And he is undoubtedly one of the foremost scholars of Pentecostalism, or if you like, African Christianity at this time. And just close to me here, I drew out two of his books. which continue to be very important resource material. The African charismatics, current developments within independent indigenous Pentecostalism in Ghana. And I have another book here, which is Size and Signs of the Spirit. And I just discovered that I had a few notes on it, and I wanted to read just one sentence from the forward. With this book, Size and Signs of the Spirit, Professor Asamoah-Gyadu cuts right and deep with a descriptive and theological knife to illuminating Ghanaian perspectives on Pentecostalism and renewal in Africa. And if you know his work, you see, you can think about not just the length, but the breadth. And I always tease him that he writes like changing clothes. And we're very excited to have him, not as a guest to Nagel. Professor Asamoah-Gyadu was a facilitator, an advisor in earlier regimes of Nagel. And then he became, a grantee himself. So today we'll be having a conversation. We'll be having a conversation about generally about his experiences, both as a facilitator, as an advisor to Nagel, but also as a grantee. So with that very brief introduction, perhaps the one who can introduce himself best would be the person in question. So I would like to start by simply asking Professor Asamoah-Gyadu, who is Professor Asamoah-Gyadu?
Well, thank you, Afe, for that generous introduction, and good afternoon, at least from Ghana. It's now about 15 minutes past 1, so I can say good afternoon from here to all of you from my office at the seminary. It's a joy to be part of this webinar series, and I thank the organizers. Congratulations also to Nelly. We've met at Calvin many times during these kinds of projects supported by Templeton in particular. If you ask me, I'm an African theologian. I've been based here at Trinity. This year, next year, 2024, will be exactly 30 years since I was hired to teach at Trinity as a young scholar. And this very September, is 40 years since I entered Trinity as a student. So I was sharing with my students at the morning worship on Monday because we've started a new semester. So I would say that it's been a blessed journey. And along this journey, I have made quite a number of very, very important friends, including Musa is online, Faith, I have seen Faith, and a number of others. I call Faith by her full name and where she comes from. So I call Faith Lugazia of Tanzania, because I thought that rhymes quite well. So in brief, that's my profile. I studied at Trinity and then at the University of Ghana, and I did my PhD in the Hollenberger tradition in Birmingham, University of Birmingham, where I was fortunate to be supervised by a professor called Emmanuel Latte, who is now at Candler School of Theology. And I worked closely with Alan Anderson, who eventually became my internal examiner. And as I have said, along the line, I have had the blessing of working and working with many, many scholars who have all contributed to my life as a professor of theology, as a pastor, and also as a theological educator. Thank you very much, Afe.
Yes, no, thank you for that opening. I know you are a pastor, so I will be sure once you begin to sermonize, then I will cut you. Okay. Yes. I think I would like to, for the audience, it would be interesting perhaps to share your experience with Nagel, first by talking about your specific project when you won the grant as a grantee. So what was your project? Could you introduce both yourself and the theme? What was your theme? Who worked with you within that project?
Okay. So the project, I mean, I had participated in a previous project with Alpha, but the project of which I was the lead researcher, so to speak, was a project on religion and human values in contemporary Africa. And we thought that we didn't want to limit this within religious studies. So I worked with an anthropologist from the Commonwealth University in Virginia. Her name is Vivian Jokoto. She's Ghanaian. And then there is a psychologist called Annabella, and then two others. But the three of us were the key persons, myself, Vivian, and Annabella. And as I have said, Vivian is an anthropologist and Annabella is a psychologist, you know. And the basic premise of the proposal was that despite the popularity of religion in Africa and African settings such as Ghana or Nigeria, there seems to be a very, very popular discourse on the streets that the practice of religion has not been consistent with level of morality. And so we try to look at African values and how they can help to form human life. Of course, we know that when we talk about Africa, the one thing that is associated with us, apart from the endemic poverty, is corruption. I tell people that we are not perhaps the most corrupt, but it looks to me as if, although corruption is a global problem, we have a particular problem in Africa, which is that the laws don't seem to work. And that tells the difference between the moral decline in our context and other contexts. Whatever it is, so that was the focus of the research. How does African, or how do African moral values inform morality within the public sphere? So that's basically was what we're trying to do.
Yes, thank you very much for those insights. Before I ask you about the outputs, tangible outputs, perhaps you could speak a little bit. It's very clear that your theme was very interdisciplinary, and I wanted you to share perhaps some of the hurdles, you know, in even bringing this team together, and how did you navigate, you know, forming this team, and even in the life of the project? Could you share maybe some experiences that perhaps were very problematic in terms of bringing together and working with people from other fields?
Right. Well, I want to believe that if Professor Dogame was to ask about people's experiences, they're going to be diverse. There is something that I discovered very early, which is not something that we had been taught, that it is very difficult to write out a proposal for grant without specialist advice. I had to consult a professor of food science and nutrition at the University of Ghana, because in the university, he is known to have attracted some of the highest grants for the University of Ghana, quite well respected. And this is somebody that fortunately I knew personally. So I went to see him, and he gave me a presentation on slides of what it takes to apply for a grant. And that was when I discovered that in a lot of institutions, the researchers don't even put together the proposal themselves. They give the raw material, what they want to do, what the project is about, and so on and so forth. And then the institution has an office, sometimes it's called Office of Research and Grant Making. And they are the ones who help you to put together the proposal, especially when it comes to technical bits. I must say that that side of things I learned very, very late. So you sit together with people to put together a proposal, and you find that although you have the knowledge as far as the subject matter is concerned, when it came to detail, budgeting, timing, and so on, you were always lacking. So for this particular grant, with my previous experiences in applying for a Templeton grant, I thought that this one we needed specialist advice. So I brought in my finance department to support. And then, as I have noted, I tried to bring together people from other fields. And so we put the ideas together. And then we had to call in support from those who know how to do budgeting in terms of timelines for research and so on. And I think, Alfred, this is something that perhaps you can put on your agenda so that if there's any seminar or workshop to let especially younger scholars understand that you don't have to do everything yourself, but that there are specialists who can advise. So it's almost like a consultancy. And interestingly, the grant was such that some bit of it could go into that kind of activity. And so that's how we're able to navigate the process to come up with what we did. You did ask a question about tangible outputs. We published International Bulletin of Missionary Research, now based, of course, at Princeton. And I was very grateful that IBMR was willing to publish a paper that was only marginally related to mission studies. Because as I have said, I work with a psychologist and anthropologist. So it is not a theological paper. It is not even a Christian paper, but they felt that there was something in it that broadly spoke to religion, faith, public morality, corruption, and the issues that concern all of us. So that's how we navigated the process to make sure that we got what we wanted.
No, thank you for those insights. And the advice is an important one that, proposal writing needs to be collaborative, especially if you work within an institution. So I think that is a point that is well taken. Let me, before I leave that point, having a psychologist and an anthropologist and yourself working together, I'm just wondering, how was role differentiation? How did you share the task? And how did this sharing of task, both in the field work, the data analysis and the dissemination, how did you manage that?
Well, thank you. I would say that of the three people on the project, I was the busiest in terms of commitment in teaching and administration and so on. So in our first meeting, I had to acknowledge that I had very limited time in terms of time that I'll make available, especially in field work. I was going to do some of it, but I was also going to point them to areas that they have to look at. So one of the first things we did was to hire a research assistant. Because let me give you an example. Anybody who has come to Ghana, Nigeria, and so on knows how this culture of public transportation that have all kinds of writings at the back. One of the writings that fascinates me is the one that says, "Poor no friend." It means if you're a poor man, you have no friend. So those kinds of writings. we thought that there were quite a number of them that had moral lessons. Some of them came from religious material, especially the Bible and the Quran. But there were also some that were sourced from traditional culture. So we sent our field workers to go and take pictures, and I have all the pictures here, to go and take pictures of those writings that have moral values. And then we group them. The ones that are talking about success, the ones that are talking about forgiveness, the ones that are talking about pride, humility, arrogance, those kinds of moral values that we work with. Which ones point to community? And then in the course of the work, we also found that there's a Ghanaian high life musician called Nana Kwame Ampedu. He was very, very popular from the 1970s when we were children. We knew Ampedu. He died only recently. And all his music, high life music, had moral lessons. And so we went on the internet and sort of listened to some of his compositions. And one particular composition actually dealt with writings on vehicles. And although this may not be related to what I'm talking about, there's one that we all laughed at. He said that in that music, that when people buy a new car, then they may write God is King. But when the car is very old, they write mind your own business. Because when people see the vehicle, they will be saying, "Oh, that old trotro, oh that." So when the thing is new, what they write is different from what they write when the thing is old. But you see, it drew our attention to a saying among the Akan of Ghana that when you catch a bird, the way the bird chirps, sings, cries, is different from when the bird is released. So the whole idea is that when the bird is in your grips, it cries like a creature in trouble. When you release it, it makes louder noises. So the whole point is when people are under pressure, when they have their back to the wall, the way they behave is different from when they have a certain type of freedom. You may not immediately connect this to public life, but what it is that when people are lower down the ladder, they are always complaining about those at the top. Once they get the position, the cries change. When they are looking for your votes, the tune is different. When they get into office, the tune is different. The tune changes. So it was a form of, and so I had to, my personal contribution, I had to draw the attention of my colleagues that there is something in the study of history and religion that we call oral discourse. So the songs that we are listening to, the proverbs and so on, we classify them as sources of oral morality. And so I had to draw attention that oral discourses in religion can be referred to as implicit or grassroots. They always come from the margins. Most of the time they come from the margins, ordinary people. And then sometimes the beggars by the roadside. When they want money, certain things they will say. You know, you get some moral lessons from them and so on and so forth. So I think it was a very, very exciting part of our work to be able to go into the street, look at what, sometimes the trot drivers wondered what we were doing with the pictures. What I've written behind my vehicle got to do with you? And we spoke to some of them. Why did you write what you have written? And there's one, a very common one that says, Mba is bad. Mba is women. So You have a mother, you have a sister. Why do you say women are bad? And he said that, well, some woman took my money and didn't marry me. So this came out of our people's experiences. In other words, although she has written that, and when the public is reading it, it will look at something that looks down on women. But it's a personal experience that he is sharing. It is not just the personal experience that was important for us, but the point he was making is that human beings can be deceptive. So you don't read gender insensitivity into it. He is talking about an experience that he has had with someone. So that's how we gather the data on morality. The key words with which we worked were culture, values, vices, tradition, and morality.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that insight. Of course, I mean, technical terms like coding. So these were the coded words that came out of the data. And yeah, our colleagues, our grantees are currently in the final phase of their project, maybe the last year, so to speak. So they are now in the stage of interpretation, analysis, and dissemination. And I would like you to share some pieces of advice, particularly with respect to your experiences at this stage of the project. And maybe this will be two parts. The first part, could you share some of your upsides and downsides? Maybe this might be helpful for a number of current grantees, because some of the experiences they have now, they think they are alone, or they are the first to experience that. For instance, data saturation, you have so much data, how do you make sense of it? So maybe an example of an upside, perhaps two examples of a downside during your project.
Thank you. Yesterday, I met all our graduate students at Trinity, from Master of Theology and Doctor of Ministry, Doctor of Theology, and so on. And when they came together, they were about 80 people. And we did a beginning of semester a seminar on research generally. And I had to take that session myself, because sometimes they don't realize that even at our level, we still face problems. I have sometimes taken an article that has been reviewed to class to read the comments that a reviewer has made on my article. And then I asked them, if people can make such remarks on my article, why do you think that I don't like you when I comment on yours? So this is a kind of friendly counsel to those who are doing research at this time, that you have to be able to face critical questions. But the most important thing is you have to do a little introspection, because you make a proposal and the grant that has been given you is given based on your proposal. And so I remember that at some point, because I was working with younger scholars, the desire to come out quickly was very strong. But I had to tell them, take your time, because it is better to have one article in a journal that is globally recognized than to have 10 in journals that nobody reads. So in terms of the downsides, having put together all the material and ask yourself, what did I propose to do? On what presentation was the grant given me? If the data you have does not fit, It may look painful that you are living it out, but it doesn't mean that it is useless. Because after you have presented your findings, you would find like a wasted effort. You can then look at the extra material and then decide that out of that, I'm going to do something else. So let me give you a quick example from this project. By the time we came out of it and we published 1 or 2 articles, I realized that in dealing with morality, people who have been offended in life are always using words of imprecation, curses, and so on. Somebody has deceived me. Somebody has taken this. Somebody has done that. So I said it may be time to look at curses in within the African public space. So I've just completed a paper on that. It wasn't part of the original project, but it helped me to write a totally different article on cursing within African public life and African Christianity. And interestingly, just as I finished writing, my attention was drawn to the fact that Philip Jenkins has written a book on Psalm 90, quite a substantial book on that. And you remember that in the COVID years, Psalm 91, in the COVID years, Psalm 91 became one of the most cited biblical passages and there's an element in it of deliverance from your enemies and so on. And people were using even to curse COVID and wherever it came from. So my point is that sometimes even the lead researcher and the assistant or whoever may not always agree. The task may look impossible because of the data, but the way to deal with it is to carefully always keep your proposal in view. It will help you to select what you need, and then much later you can use what you didn't need at the time for something else.
No, that's an important counsel, not to trash your proposal as soon as you get your grant, but make your proposal a reference point, especially asking what was the question I started with, what was my objective of this research? And that's also coming to reflect in the output and in the writing to be sure that you answer the questions that you set for yourself and cross-check whether you are actually answering the question or not. I think it's an important takeaway. I'm going to ask you about the kind of dissemination strategies that you used then and perhaps also now, but I think you already touched on it a bit. To what extent do you continue to tap from the data you gathered a few years ago, maybe even now? And I think you've given such an example, which means that your data does not die with the end of the Nagel project. Research is a lifespan. You can continue to tap on your data, even use the question that you didn't complete answering, to form the basis for a new project. So might you have any other dissemination strategy to share in terms of your specific project then?
Well, as far as scholars are concerned, I think our primary objective is always to publish in academic journals and so on. A couple of years ago, I was at a meeting. And after the meeting, this wasn't an academic meeting. It was just let's call it a religious meeting, some kind of a church service. And when we closed, people were shaking my hands. And there was one elderly woman who came up and asked me, Professor, have you written anything I can read? I couldn't answer the question because, yes, I have written something, but is it something that this elderly woman could read? And the answer was no. So it was a question that sat on my mind for a long time. And I decided that the way to disseminate certain types of information, like this one on morality, is not always to aim at publishing academic journals. So there is a magazine called The Sentinel, and I put 3-4 pages in it. I have given seminars on it. Only recently, just about 2 months ago, there was a seminar at the University of Ghana, and I was invited to speak. It wasn't an academic context because there were a lot of people from ordinary life who were there. You know, so, and morality is a public issue. So every now and then you would have a radio station, a TV station call you up. Oh, there is a story about corruption, and what do you think about it? In answering the question, they realized that I am not perhaps talking like, yes, an will answer the question, but so the dissemination and popular not in the sense of journalistic, but breaking it down such that the average person will have access to the technical work you have done. I think, especially those of us who work in Africa should be doing that a bit more. I see quite one or two of my friends who write in newspapers in Nigeria, and we have to do more of that. So dissemination have been at 3 levels, if you ask me. First, to give academic and non-academic seminars on the subject. Second, to publish in a way that will give the public access to what you have. And third, to do academic publishing. And of course, I mean, I don't know about your institutions, but at Trinity, where I teach, if a professor, a faculty member applies for promotion, we have to evaluate the person at the academic level. And also there is a section that says contribution to society. So your CV must show that whatever you have done academically has reached not just the academic constituency, but also ordinary people. So that's how we disseminated it.
No, thank you. That is very helpful. I think I have to be quick because I see your internet is tweaking, and evidence that you didn't pay sufficient tithes this week.
That's true. We are in injury time.
Yeah, so yeah, I think you hit at a very important point about dissemination, that the days are gone whereby we put our eggs in one basket. You're pointing attention to multiple dissemination strategies, both academic and non-academic. And today, a lot of people use social media to disseminate some of their findings, and so on and so forth. And you are quite right. Contribution not just to the academic life, but also public to the civil society. And I hope that our grantees are paying attention to this. I know that some of them are already using these outlets, like through radio programs or newspapers or even community events to disseminate aspects of their work. So thank you for sharing that. Let me limit my questions now to 2 so that we will have time for the audience to engage you. Although you talked about these multiple strategies of dissemination, my next question would be the implication of your research work for not just your research work, but the findings for curriculum, the academic curriculum, and for teaching. Could you share how and to what extent your research on morality and other researches have a place in or have shaped your teaching and perhaps the academic curriculum in your institution itself? How would you describe this?
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I will limit myself to this particular work on morality. And the first is that we already had an existing discipline called Church and Society. I don't teach it, but I had to engage with the people who teach church and society to make sure that I point them to the right literature and also these publications that we have had, so that I've had a problem with a lot of African institutions. You go to a typical African institution and you struggle to find African scholars on the curriculum. So I had to make sure that not only are we introducing an element that has to do with human life and human behavior in the curriculum through the course on church and society, but also to make sure that the literature that has come to attention, especially those that are been written by Africans. Of course, we all know the older folk, John Mbiti and Ngana, Kwame Gyekye, and others, And then we have also instituted some graduate level, or let me say, seminary-wide seminars. Just this semester, we are beginning a new set of seminars called Spirituality and Moral Values. It is not a non-academic program, but every Friday from 10 to 12 noon, the students are going to meet to listen to participate in the seminar on moral values, especially as it relates to spirituality, because we are a seminary. So we have just finished the program, the outline yesterday, and it's not going to be one person. I'm going to meet all the students together to introduce the seminars. And then every Friday, a different person comes with a different topic. The person can come and talk about living in community, or talk about integrity in leadership, and so on and so forth. So that's one way in which we are disseminating. And of course, the students who are taking courses in ethics, and also we have a course at the graduate level here called Christianity in the Non-Western World. I teach that course anyway, so that these papers too will find space in that course when we offer it. So these are the different ways in which we have inserted this in the curriculum.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's very helpful. As you know, curriculum development is very integral to our current project, but also the past. But thanks for sharing that example. Just before I now ask the audience to ask questions or make their comments, we have the adage that the words of our elders are words of wisdom, although that is being problematized today, that not all words of elders, are words of wisdom. What would you say to the current grantees who are in their last year of, of work, finalizing their work and preparing for all kinds of dissemination? What would be your words of wisdom to them?
Well, I would say that the first thing you get from embarking on such a journey is experience. It's always a learning curve, because you come across things that you never bargained for. If it is done well, one thing will lead to the other. I'm not suggesting that our current grantees have done that, but I've also seen situations in which people have taken the money, they have cooked the data, thinking that they are deceiving somebody. There are quite a number of people who got huge grants who, after submitting their reports, could not make progress because they didn't get into the trenches to learn how to do research and write. The second thing is that having the data is one thing, translating it into readable material is another. There is no point in writing things that nobody understands. That is not what makes one a scholar. And in the recent past, I have bemoaned the fact that there are people who are writing you read 2-3 pages, you simply don't know where it is going. I don't know who pushed into our heads that when you write and people don't understand, it means you have done well. I don't know who brought that philosophy. Whatever it is, my suggestion is that you have to hit the ground running, because to get a grant at this stage of your life is a privilege. And that privilege must be reflected in the work you do. It has to reflect in building up your own capacity as a scholar. It also has to reflect on your institution. So this is not a personal journey. It's a journey on which you have to bring people along. So I would say everybody must finish hard, but most importantly, you must be clear in your mind where you go from here. Submission of your final result is only a bus stop. So you pick the bus and you must know where you are headed so that you don't appear in the public space in 2023. And then from 2024 to 2026, they are looking for you and what you have done, and you can't be found. If I have to do everything again, if people call themselves professor for 5 years and they haven't done anything, the institution should withdraw the title. But in other words, once you submit, please make sure that you keep the momentum. I was taught that I should aim at doing a little every day. And I know my students don't believe me, but I will still continue to tell them. I tell them that if they see one article in print that has been published, it has taken at least 6 months. They don't believe it, but it is what it is. So there's no rush, but make sure that you stick to your calendar in terms of writing, publication, and so on, so that this doesn't become a terminal. I've got the grant, I've finished, and that's it. Wherever we turn, we must see that you are working and increasing, contributing to knowledge. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very convinced that you are not speaking to the choir. You are not preaching to the choir. So there's a lot that will be taken home from this, but we would now like to open it up for a larger conversation. And I would please encourage you, if you can, to put on your video if you want to ask a question, or use the chat sign and let us know. Even if you prefer to type the question on the chat platform, do that, and we would recognize you. I just want to warn that Professor Asamoah-Gyadu is a charismatic pastor, but he didn't preach. So your questions should be succinct, straight to the point. He's such a good example. So I will call the host. See, Christian, and then followed by Felix. Please.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Yes.
For giving me this opportunity. And thank you, Professor Asamoah-Gyadu, for the relaxed and frank discussion of your project. I think those of us who are young are picking a lot from this. And I want to say that I'm excited that you'll be coming to Pentecost University to speak on moral values. We have been prophetic in giving you this topic after listening to you. Thank you very much. Just to ask this question, when you are putting grant proposals together, do you need to indicate the non-academic disseminations? Are they some of the criteria that are considered for the grant to be given as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Christian, for your question. Might we take a second one, then you respond, and then we go to the next level? Felix, unmute, please.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think listening to Professor Asamoah again once more is it's for me a blessing, because it opens up very many areas that one could just think like they are just normal things, but they are when you open them up in this such a way, it is simple but very, very interesting, and one can learn a lot from it. I think those are areas that one can ignore, but they are very, very important. Now, my question is, let me take the example of Cameroon here. In Cameroon, on the issue of dissemination of research, in Cameroon, there is a saying here, I don't know how it may be true in Ghana. In Cameroon, there's a saying here that if you want to hide something from the Cameroonian, you write it in a book. You write it in a book. And so a lot of people are afraid to actually write. And so most persons now, what they are using now is YouTube, or just doing video or audios of their write-up. I don't know how that one can be of help in this area of dissemination. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felix. We'll get a response, and then we'll go to the second level.
Yeah. Well, in terms of whether you should include the non-academic part of your work in the proposal, I would say it depends on what the proposal expects of you. Sometimes they would ask a very general question: how will the result of your research help the society, or something like that? If you have to answer such a question as part of proposal writing, then yes, you can state it. But if the proposal is simply looking for you to produce an academic material, then you stay within that. But then after that, after you have fulfilled the requirement, nothing stops you from disseminating your material in a non-academic way, or through non-academic sources. So my answer to your question is that it depends on what the proposal is asking you to do. In other words, you answer the question before you, and then after that, you can decide what to do the rest. I think that the use of media, whether conventional or social media, must be considered an important part of dissemination. We know that the reading culture in our part of the world is a bit problematic, but it doesn't mean that people don't read at all. I don't think that is what you wanted to say. So those of us in the field of religious and theological scholarship, we have a number of videos that people listen to, you know. So these days, listening to a video is like reading, because there is data that you can only obtain from video recordings, you know, or information on social media. I have a small book on COVID-19 called Christianity and Faith in the COVID-19 Era. I wanted the book to be read mostly in Ghana, so I published it here in Ghana. And during the lockdown period, I just listened to what people were saying on the internet, on television, on radio. And that was the raw material for me to be able to write that book. So I don't think it is an either-or situation. If you are a scholar, you'll be expected to write in scholarly journals and books. But at the same time, you would also be expected in a technological age to be able to put some things on some things virtually that people can have access to. So it's not an either-or situation. I think we should do both. Thank you.
Thank you for those words of wisdom. We go to the second segment, and I would like to invite Professor Musa Dube. Unmute and...
Good morning, and thank you, Kwabena, for your presentation. Whenever I'm in Ghana, I'm intrigued by seeing the Adinkra symbols everywhere, on clothes, on carvings, and all sorts of things. And I assume that they are one of the major way in which the people communicate moral lessons in the public to one another, or even about what they subscribe to. So I wondered if, apart from reading the writings in the cars and all that, how your research may have integrated that aspect of Ghana, which I believe is very much unique to Ghana. And I always feel like we are yet to fully take cognizance of what that text is communicating. So I would like to hear a little bit of your comments on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Musa. Hold on, we'll take one or two more questions. May I invite, if Jim or Diane, do you have any pieces of advice to our grantees? Diane?
I'm just excited to hear, excuse me, to hear the progress is being made. I've been aware of the grants over the years, but I haven't been as involved as directly. So I just so concur with all that Prof. Asamoah has been sharing with you. And I'm just personally thrilled to see all of you here with the heart for worship and reaching out for these grants. And I couldn't agree with Kwabena more in terms of the importance of all of those data from the ground, be it the slogans on the trotros or the life of the church in Africa is just, you are accustomed to it, but it is just so vibrant and so significant that I want to just really encourage you to go out and do the research that you are best, and perhaps you're really uniquely placed to do the kinds of research. So no particular advice at this time. I'm just my heart is full to see those of you who are growing in scholarship, and we're cheering you from the sidelines and awaiting the outcomes, because it's really feeding the church at all levels. So some of those of us who are now placed beyond the continent of Africa, still wanting to engage with Africa as much as possible, the data that you are bringing is really, really, really vital, very significant to the life of the global church. So please carry on what you're doing, and God bless you as you continue.
Thank you, Diane, and apologies for putting you on the spot. Jim, would you like to comment, and then we have Kwabena respond to Musa's?
I will comment. I'm enjoying this tremendously. I will not turn on my video because I had surgery yesterday, and you really don't want to see my face.
Sorry.
I'm fine, but I'm really enjoying this. To the detailed advice, and I'm learning a lot, which I very much appreciate. I do have one suggestion, one thing for people to think about as they're in the stage of trying to figure out what it is they've seen in the field. One of the things we humans do is we create stories, and then we interpret what we see through the means of those stories. And this is both, in everyday life, but scholars do this as well. And in my field, sociology, unfortunately, people often, the stories limit what they're capable of seeing. And so the question that I always suggest people ask of themselves is, what story am I seeing in front of me? Am I seeing a story of religious vibrancy, whatever it happens to be? And what does that story prevent me from seeing? And how might I be able to see that more carefully? So in the United States, the dominant story of secularization prevents us from seeing a lot of religious life. For example, the alternate story of vital religions being more conservative prevents us from seeing the progressivism of vital religions. And I watch my colleagues do this all the time. And so that's the source of my suggestion.
Thank you very much, Jim, and wishing you a quick recovery. All right, so Kwabena, we come back to you on Musa's point.
Right. Thank you, Musa, for bringing the Adinkra symbols. Yes, we did mention Adinkra symbols as a source of moral education, particularly in Ghana. So yes, you are right in the kind of purposes that it serves. But to add something else to what you didn't ask, is that for the longest time, Ghanaian fabrics have always had a name. And those names also tend to have some moral import. So I'm just adding to what the question that Musa asked. So sometimes when you are stepping out into public space, depending on the occasion, Ghanaian women will not wear certain fabrics because the fabrics tell a story. If you are going for, say, a wedding, you won't put a fabric that says Ebusua Dofun, which means the family loves the dead. Because once you appear, you think that it's a wedding, the cloth is white, but the cloth has a name. And the name doesn't fit the occasion. Let me tell you something that my friends who belong more to the West may not be aware. Sometimes they come to Ghana, see the fabric on the market is very nice, and then they buy it, sew an outfit, and appear at any function with it. And so, depending on what the community thinks, they may wonder what this person knows what he or she is about. So those things happen very often. Mercifully, Musa, we have made important strides in the study of Adinkra symbols. One of my recently hired colleagues, the name is Kofi Amwating. He studied at Asbury Theological Seminary, did his PhD there, returned to Ghana only 3 years ago, and his PhD was on Adinkra symbols. He has published the material here in Ghana, so it's very affordable. But even before him, there were 1 or 2 other books on Adinkra symbols. So there's quite a bit of material on Adinkra symbols now, and the value that they offer in terms of public teaching on public morality. But I've also added the cloth. That I am not aware that anybody has studied yet, but every cloth that is produced, it is not the manufacturers who give it the name, is the users. How the name becomes national, I can't tell. There's a particular cloth. We had a head of state called Kotoka, after whom our airport is named. There's a cloth called Kotoka pencil. That is Kotoka's pencil, because I think the cloth was produced around the time he died. And up till today, that's the name that is given to it. There's one that calls Eni Brain Soja. Eni is ice, Ija is fire. So no matter how angry you are, you don't produce fire, something like that. So if you owe somebody money, somebody owes you money, and you are going to collect your money, and you go in that kind of cloth, the person will wonder, hey, why did he put this or why did you put that? So that's it about the cloth. I take Diane and James' submissions to be contributions, so I have no response to that. But I like what Jim said about stories, and I think I like to join Afe in wishing you well in your post-surgery recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwabena. Yes, so we'll have maybe 1 or 2 more rounds of question and comment. So who would like to go next? Just a footnote to say for Musa, one of the 12 current projects, Nagel projects, there's a project in Ghana that is actually an aspect of it is focusing on the Adinkra symbols, and they held a very successful workshop. I think 3 weeks ago in Ghana.
And I think my colleague was there.
Yes, yes. He was one of the lead speakers. Yes, thank you. So, more comments, questions? Speak now or forever be quiet. Perhaps I can see Professor Philomena Owanra. If you are there, would you like to offer any advice while we're waiting for the next? And then Damaris as well.
Thank you very much, Afe. I had a class, so I have joined at 5 o'clock Kenya time. Okay. So I missed the presentation.
Oh.
So for now, I don't have anything to say.
Oh, okay. No, but thank you for.
It's just good to know that you are there.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So, Philo, I'm sure Damaris would have 1 or 2 things to add to the conversation as pieces of advice to grantees.
Oh, thank you. I'm not sure that I have advice. I had more questions for Kwabena.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead with your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, your comments on cultural values and morality on symbols and clothing. And just wondering how much that's just about morality, but also about social critique, societal critique. And I have in mind a number of things in Kenya where the matatu culture is also, very vibrant in terms of not just public morality conversations on the drawings and the write-ups, but also about relationships, about society. So one time I'm driving home and I see a vehicle with these writings. I was just okay until education corrupted me. Another one is, please don't laugh at my car. Your daughter might be here. And, so I really just found your conversations very interesting. And one more comment that I wanted to say is that we have in Kenya, East Africa generally, a special clothing called leso, which is worn largely by women, especially in the rural areas when they are cooking, and an entire culture of conversations, of relations, of social critiques, public morality has emerged out of that. I'm not sure that we have much writing and conversations going on, but I do know of one lady called Mushai Mwangola, who's written an entire thesis on that kind of clothing. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about that. But on a more specific question is, Prof, I would like you to talk to our grantees about what constitutes the best teams, the best research teams. What are some of those characteristics that they bring together for a successful team, and how do they navigate university politics, departmental politics, leadership wrangles, and all kinds of tensions that you can think about? Maybe just a piece of advice for our current and future grantees. Thank you.
Thank you, Damaris. Yeah, so Kwabena, go ahead.
Well, I'm sure, thank you. I'm sure Damaris herself realizes that she has asked a very difficult question. She knows that. I would have been happier if she had turned her question into advice for all of us. We live in an imperfect world. And I think we must all appreciate the fact that in a context where upward mobility is determined by effort and productivity, there are always these kinds of human difficulties that we have to deal with. I'm not going to go into great detail, but I recall that I had worked very quietly, done all that I was supposed to do, and then it came to applying for promotion. And especially when I was moving from senior lecturer to associate professor, the applications, as you know, from your various institutions go through different processes. And the first person who must be the recipient of my papers took the papers, believe it or not, kept the papers in his drawer for a calendar year. So for a calendar year, the papers didn't even move the first step. I was fortunate at the time that there was somebody on the board who was a friend. And one day they were coming for a board meeting and he just decided to pass through my office to greet me. And when he came, I told him and he said, well, I'll go to the meeting and ask a harmless question. So he went to the meeting and he asked that, oh, we are friends. And he knows I had told him that I was going to put an application for promotion, but it hasn't come here. Have I applied by any chance? And the person in charge was forced to confess that I had applied. So they asked the person to go and bring the papers. In our system, when you write, there should be a cover letter, and the cover letter is dated. So when the papers were brought in an envelope and it was opened, they realized that it was almost a year in the same week when they were meeting. So these things happen, unfortunately. The mere fact that an international organization has given you a grant to do research will attract some difficulties from colleagues and so on. As I'm saying, these things are human. Perhaps that may not be as big a problem as those in the team who who have either ideas for the money and who can bring fictitious claims. So you write a grant that you want to do research, the grant is given, but you have other ideas for the resources. I think those are things that one must keep in mind when you are applying for grants. For many years at the University of Ghana, the university struggled with research allowance because the story out there was that you gave the research allowance and people used them those days to buy television sets and sometimes even cars, and the research doesn't get done. So recently I served on the council of a university, and when we're thinking about these things, I told them that they should insert a clause in which every faculty member is supposed to give every academic year an update of what you have done with the research grant. You are not applying for promotion. Just tell us that the research grant that was given to me at the beginning of the academic year, this is what I have used it for. And the results have been just sad. People have collected money, they haven't worked. Whatever it is, that is other people's problem. So when you are putting together the team, I think the team members must be selected carefully. They should be people who demonstrate an appetite for research. And as I like to tell my doctoral students, there's a difference between having a doctorate and being a scholar. So don't come here and throw money away if all you want is to have a doctorate. If there are people on the faculty, I must say very sadly, who have been here for so many years, according to our statutes, if somebody teaches here for 6 years and they haven't moved, you have to terminate them. If you consider that I have been here for 3 decades, it means everybody teaching here is either my colleague or my student. I'm the president. How do you look at somebody's face and write a letter and say, go home? You know, so if I put this within the context of what we are discussing in terms of grants, grantees, and how to use money, please select people who have an appetite for research. It is not everybody in the institution who wants to do academic work. And so you have to select your team members very carefully. Otherwise, you end up giving money to people who spend it and tell you stories.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those further insights. Before we draw to a close, have our last segment. Unebudo has specially requested for a screenshot, and we are in the age of artificial intelligence. So the fact that your name appears may not be a correct representation. So I want to encourage you, apart from Jim, if you would like for a moment, there are two screens. If you like to show your face, but if you're also allergic to showing your face, that is okay. So Unebudo, tell us when you are ready to take your screenshots.
Okay, I'm ready now.
Okay, so please, could you allow your face to be seen for 1 minute or 1 second? That also means you smile, guys. Yeah. Okay. That's better. So do you have the first screen? Okay, could you go?
I'm gonna do the second screen now.
Okay. Tell us when you are okay.
I'm all done.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. And apologies for showing your face, but now that you've shown your face, I know all those who are physically here. So I encourage you to ask the questions on the last round before we close. Any more questions or comments for the speaker? Yes, Telesia, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. Kwabena, for your insightful presentation. Was just looking at your topic, that is religion and human values in contemporary Africa, and looking at the project that I and my team are working on is on the value of African communality and religious experiences. And what was coming to my mind when I heard of your topic is whether you had an aspect that was emerging, that the philosophy of communitarianism, or rather Ubuntu, was kind of shifting to individualism, and how, if it was, you did navigate that. And I am drawing that from an aspect that you just pointed out and let go on gender insensitivity. You did talk about a sticker probably that you came across, that women are bad. That, of course, was informed by an experience that one person had gone through, and probably many more that were kind of just emerging from people's life experiences. Then who determines what is morally upright or not? Talking about religion, was it Christianity? Was it Islam? You know, what was your point of departure? Thank you.
Thank you, Telesia. Can we have one more?
Right. Well, thank you. Okay.
Kwabena, I wanted one more question, except you are afraid for the last question.
Well.
Okay. Anyone before he responds? Okay, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, so it's virtually impossible to talk about religion and human values in an African context without a sense of community. I also know that there is this debate on whether we are moving from communitarianism to individualism and so on. I think the problem is a bit more sophisticated than that. because we cannot talk about a transition without talking about the perils of urbanization, of social media, and so on and so forth. Because sometimes the shift is discussed without the factors that have contributed to it. We live, those of you who know this seminary, it's a very small community. And yet we do a lot by social media. So if I want to communicate with the faculty, I don't have to call a meeting. You know, so if in the past we were meeting once a month, now we meet once a quarter. I have my older aunt, my mother's big sister. My mother died early, so her big sister, who became our mother. We, as you know, we don't say aunt, so it's also my mother. I used to visit her. She lives in a place about 1.5 hours drive from Accra. I used to visit her every month to give her upkeep money. Now, sometimes I do it once in 6 months because she has a phone. I don't have to go there to give the money. I send my mobile money transfer. She gets it. She puts the phone on, what do you call it? Video. She sees my face. She's happy, and that's it. So we are not seeing each other physically. And the good thing about this one is that my siblings are scattered around the world. And she's our mother. Sometimes you can make a group call, so she sees everybody. You know, so I have seen writings on this shift from communitarian values to individualism that do not account for the fact that there are ways of being community that we hadn't, that we are not accounting for. And I think that is important. And then, of course, the issue of gender insensitivity. I mean, these are things that we are going to struggle with. I received a British professor in my office a couple of weeks ago who was going on and on about everything that is wrong in Africa. And then I told him that I'm surprised by the polls, at least within the Republican Party, of somebody like Trump. Everything he has said shows he has no respect for women. And yet, you people don't talk about it. You know, it doesn't justify gender insensitivity in Africa. What I'm saying is that we have allowed ourselves to be drawn along a certain narrative. And we have lived with that. So let's challenge gender insensitivity in our context. But we also at the same time have to recognize that we live in a world that is changing rapidly. And therefore, in doing the interpretation, we must account for some of the development that we encounter around the world. As to the sources of such things as gender insensitivity and lack of a sense of community, I will encourage you to also pay attention to drama. When we're growing up, that was before internet and so on, computer and so on, there was a lot of drama on Ghana television. It was the only television station we had. There's a particular drama series called Osofodazi. And it was all on society and morality. Talk to any Ghanaian above 50 years old. They still remember that drama series. Up to today, we talk about that series in our home and in places, and some of the sayings that came from that drama series. Sometimes through performance, drama, certain stereotypical ideas of gender are put in the public sphere. So for those of you who are interested in gender, I would say let's pay attention to drama, especially local drama. and how they portray women, what they say about women and so on. In terms of the limits of our work with religion, we looked at traditional religion and Christianity. We didn't go too much into Islam. We stayed within traditional religion and Christianity. I hope I've answered your questions. Thank you. Thank you all very much for indulging me.
Thank you.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you so much for even your final response is very illuminating. And I just want to encourage us to continue to be part of our webinar series and other programs. We also have the podcast. And for those who missed bits and pieces of this, it's usually cleaned up and put on our both Nagel website, but also our Facebook. So you have a second opportunity to screen this if you miss any parts. I'm not going to say thank you to Kwabena because he would ask for tithes and offering at the end.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
I would therefore ask the Nagel director to just wrap things up for us.
Yeah, I'm very happy to pay the tithes.
I always say you're a Christian.
I am. Anyway, on behalf of the Nagel Institute, my colleague Nelly, Nebundo, and Afe, I want to thank you, Professor Kwabena, most sincerely for such a beautiful presentation. For those of us who are waking up now, some people are finishing their day. This is an energizer. You know, it's just so important to wake up to such lively conversations, you know, infused with so much wisdom and nuggets of, you know, advice from the many years of accumulation in research, you know. So we are so deeply grateful for speaking to us this morning, to our grantees and future grantees. I think people have gained so much, and I'm grateful. We'll pay the tithes later, but thank you, Prof. Always a pleasure to see you. And you know, thank you. Can we just give him a nice clap? We don't have the bossa today, but this time you are physically present. And you know, to all our participants today, thank you so much for gracing this wonderful webinar. As always, we are delighted to see you, to see your faces. So many of you joined today that have haven't seen in a long time, and I'm very grateful for that. And we look forward to more webinars and more participations. Lots of exciting things coming up very soon, and we look forward to walking this journey with you. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Back to you, Afe.
Yes, no, well, I think you have the last word. So thank you. Yes, thank you for coming, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Yeah. See you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.